I still remember the sound of the wine bottle shattering against the kitchen tile. It wasn't anger or clumsiness, it was something worse. Patricia's hands trembled as she stared at me, the fragments of green glass scattered around her bare feet. "Michael," she stammered, her voice shaky, "why are you looking at me like that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. The truth was, I'd been standing there for a solid 30 seconds, just watching her. Watching the way her body flinched when she realized I'd come home earlier than expected. Watching her eyes dart toward the window, then to the front door, then back to me, like a trapped animal. You see, Patricia was never the nervous type. She thrived on control, on poise, on always being the one who knew what was coming next. That's why her panic was so startling. That's why I froze, rooted to the spot, while my brain scrambled to piece together what had just happened. The timeline was simple enough. I had a last-minute cancellation at work. One of my site inspections got postponed because of heavy rain, so I decided to surprise Patricia with her favorite takeout. As I turned into our driveway, I noticed a sleek black car pulling away fast, its taillights vanishing around the corner before I could make out the driver. Nothing unusual, I told myself. People turn around here all the time. But then I stepped inside the house. The first thing I noticed was the faint smell of cologne. Not mine. Not Patricia's either, it was sharp, woody, unfamiliar. Then there was the kitchen, where I found her, barefoot, in a dress I hadn't seen before, with 2 glasses of wine on the counter. She'd already poured them. "Everything okay?" I finally managed, my voice more even than I expected. Her answer came too quickly. "Of course. I just dropped the bottle." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. My stomach nodded. "Right," I said slowly, glancing at the clock. "Bit early for wine, don't you think?" Her laugh was forced, brittle. "It's not like I'm driving anywhere." The air between us was thick, suffocating. Something was wrong. And we both knew it. I knelt down to help her clean up the glass, but my eyes kept wandering around the room, to the counter, to the half-open back door. She followed my gaze and moved quickly to close it, locking it with a loud click. "Michael," she said, breaking the silence, "you're making me nervous." "What's with the interrogation?" "Interrogation?" I echoed. "I haven't even started." I didn't plan to say that, but once the words were out, they felt right. There was no point tiptoeing around the tension anymore. Patricia's face hardened, her mask slipping for the briefest moment before she put it back on. "You're being ridiculous," she said, brushing past me toward the sink. But it was already too late. Something about her reaction, her movements, the way she avoided my eyes, it all screamed guilty. I didn't know what she was guilty of yet, but I knew one thing for sure: Patricia wasn't just clumsy, and that bottle hadn't shattered by accident. And I was going to find out why. I didn't push Patricia that evening. Instead, I did the one thing that felt right: I pretended everything was fine. I smiled, joked, and even helped her sweep up the glass shards from the kitchen floor. If I'd pressed her, I knew she'd clam up or turn defensive, and I needed her to feel like she was still in control. Inside, though, I was working through every detail of what I'd just seen. The smell of cologne. The second glass of wine. The panicked way she slammed the back door shut. Every piece of it felt off. Patricia had always been quick-witted, but this time, she looked cornered. After dinner, I kept myself busy. I washed the dishes while she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. My mind was elsewhere, formulating a plan. I needed time to investigate without her watching my every move. Later, as we were getting ready for bed, I noticed something else strange: the window in our bedroom was open. The night air was chilly, and Patricia hated the cold. She always insisted on keeping the windows shut once the weather turned. "Did you open this?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She glanced over briefly and shrugged. "I must have earlier. Forgot to close it, I guess." Her answer didn't sit right with me, but I let it slide. I didn't want her to know I was paying attention to every little thing. Patricia left for work around 8:30, the same as always. I watched her car disappear down the street before grabbing my phone and heading outside. I waited until her car was out of sight before grabbing my jacket and heading outside. The air was crisp, and the ground was still damp from the rain 2 nights ago. As I approached the side of the house, I saw it immediately: footprints. My pulse quickened. The prints led from the edge of the lawn to the base of the window, where they disappeared into the mud. It didn't take a detective to figure out that someone had been standing there recently, likely climbing out or climbing in. I pulled out my phone and took several photos, making sure to capture every detail. The size of the prints suggested they were from an adult, maybe a man. My first instinct was to measure them, but I didn't have anything on hand. Instead, I placed my shoe next to one of the prints for reference and snapped another photo. Heading back inside, I reviewed the photos on my phone. The realization hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't some vague suspicion anymore. Something real, something undeniable, had happened in my home. And Patricia was at the center of it. I spent the rest of the day going through the house, looking for anything else that seemed out of place. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I needed answers. The wine glasses from last night were still sitting on the counter. In the hallway closet, something else caught my attention: a jacket I didn't recognize. It was hanging neatly among Patricia's coats, but it wasn't hers. I pulled it out and inspected it. The tag was a high-end brand, the kind I knew Patricia wouldn't buy for herself, and it was a size too large for her frame. I checked the pockets and found a crumpled receipt from a nearby gas station dated 2 days ago. The time stamp? 10:43 p.m., late enough. I photographed the receipt and put the jacket back exactly where I found it. I needed to figure out who those footprints belonged to. I spent hours that night going through the photos, trying to figure out what to do next. Should I call someone? A private investigator? The police? No. Not yet. The plan was simple: gather more evidence, take my time, and approach the situation logically. But the reality of it, the gnawing thought of Patricia betraying me, was too much to bear. Every time I looked around the house, I saw signs of her deception. The open window. The footprints. The strange jacket. I tried to distract myself with work, errands, anything, but the betrayal hung over me like a storm cloud. By late afternoon, I was a mess. The logical part of me screamed to keep calm, to stay focused. The other part, the one drowning in anger and heartbreak, reached for the bottle of whiskey in the kitchen cabinet. I didn't bother with a glass. The burn as the first gulp slid down my throat felt like some twisted comfort, but it wasn't enough. Another swig, then another. Before long, I was sitting at the kitchen table, chain smoking, the room clouded with cigarette smoke and reeking of alcohol. When Patricia walked through the door that evening, I was deep in it. My head was spinning, my vision blurry, and the bottle was already half empty. Michael? Her voice was sharp, startled. What the hell is going on? Why are you home? And are you drunk? I turned to her, my bloodshot eyes meeting hers. The sight of her standing there, so calm, so composed, like she hadn't ripped my life apart, made something in me snap. You think I don't know? My voice was loud, slurred. I slammed the whiskey bottle onto the table, the sound echoing through the room. You think I'm stupid, Patricia? You think I don't see what's going on in this house? Her eyes widened in shock. Michael, what are you talking about? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I barked a laugh that didn't feel like my own. I'll tell you what's wrong. You're a liar. A goddamn liar. You cheated on me. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Patricia froze, her expression flickering between confusion and anger. What the hell are you saying? She snapped, her voice rising. Cheated on you? Are you insane? Where is this coming from? You think I don't know? I yelled, stumbling to my feet. The open window, the footprints, the goddamn jacket in the closet. Who was here, Patricia? Who the hell was in my house? She took a step back, her hands raised as if to defend herself from my accusations. Michael, calm down. You're drunk, And you're not making any sense. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. I shouted, my voice cracking with the weight of my emotions. You've been lying to me. You've been sneaking around, doing God knows what with God knows who. Patricia's face hardened. For a moment, she looked like she might lash out, but then she took a deep breath, her voice steadying. Fine, she said coldly. You want answers? I'll give you answers, if it'll shut you up. She grabbed a chair and sat down across from me, her arms crossed. The window was open because I was trying to air out the house, she began, her tone sharp, impatient. It was stuffy, Michael. And those footprints you're so worked up about? They're mine. I went outside to clean the damn window because I couldn't reach it from inside. The ground was wet, so yes, I left footprints. She paused, glaring at me, daring me to challenge her. And the jacket, she continued, belongs to Maria. She was over the other night, remember? We had wine together, talked about her problems with her boyfriend. She brought it from the dry cleaner for her husband but left it here by mistake. Her explanations came out fast, rehearsed, as if she'd been preparing for this. And the cologne? I asked bitterly. What about that? Let me guess that Maria's boyfriend wears cologne now, and it just happened to stick to the jacket? Patricia rolled her eyes. No, Michael. That was probably from the air freshener I sprayed after Maria left. It's one of those masculine scents. I've told you this before, but you never listened to me. I stared at her, my head swimming. She spoke with such conviction, such certainty, that for a moment, I felt like the idiot she was making me out to be. Michael, she said, her voice softening. You're drunk. You're upset, and you've made up this crazy story in your head. But none of it's true. I love you. I'd never cheat on you. Can't you see how ridiculous this all sounds? Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. What if she was right? What if I'd blown everything out of proportion? I wanted to believe her, to let go of the anger and pain tearing me apart. I'm sorry, I muttered, sinking back into my chair. I don't know what's wrong with me. Patricia reached across the table and took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. Michael, she said gently, you've been under a lot of stress lately. I think you need to take some time off work, get your head straight. We can get through this, okay? Together. I nodded, the alcohol dulling my instincts, my suspicions. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Patricia was telling the truth. But deep down, a small, nagging voice refused to be silenced. The morning after my drunken meltdown, I woke with a pounding headache and a gnawing sense of regret. Patricia had already left for work, her side of the bed cold. The night's events replayed in my mind, each detail making me cringe. I had shouted, accused, made a fool of myself, and worst of all, I'd let her words soothe me into submission. I staggered into the kitchen for coffee, the smell of stale whiskey still clinging to the air. As I sipped the bitter brew, I tried to convince myself that Patricia's explanations made sense. The window, the footprints, the jacket, all of it could be innocent. Couldn't it? But as I walked back to the bedroom, I noticed something, the jacket was gone. I opened the closet and rifled through the hangers, but there was no sign of it. Patricia must have taken it to return to Maria. Or maybe. No. I pushed the thought away. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered from the night before. Patricia had been too calm, too prepared with her answers. And Maria's involvement? It seemed like a convenient excuse. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, debating my next move. If Patricia was telling the truth, there was no harm in confirming it. And if she wasn't, well, I needed to know. I scrolled through my contacts and found Maria's number. We weren't particularly close, but I'd spoken to her enough over the years to make the call without raising suspicion. Hi, Maria, it's Michael, I said when she picked up. Do you have a minute? Michael. Of course, she replied, her tone light but cautious. Is everything okay? I hesitated for a moment, then dove in. I wanted to ask you about something Patricia mentioned. She said you were over the other night and accidentally left a jacket at our place. Did you manage to get it back? There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to make my chest tighten. Oh, yes, Maria said finally, her voice suddenly brighter. I did leave my husband's jacket there. Patricia was kind enough to return it to me this morning. Her words matched Patricia's story perfectly, but something about her tone felt off. Forced. Great, I said, keeping my voice casual. I'm glad you got it back. By the way, I didn't realize you and Patricia had a wine night. It must have been fun. Another pause. Oh, yes, it was, Maria said quickly. Just a little impromptu thing. We hadn't seen each other in a while, so it was nice to catch up. Her words were right, but the delivery wasn't. Maria sounded unsure, like she was grasping for the right thing to say. Thanks, Maria, I said, ending the call before she could ask any questions of her own. As I set my phone down, I felt more confused than ever. Maria had confirmed Patricia's story, but the way she'd done it left me uneasy. Her responses were rushed, hesitant, like someone trying to stick to a script. I sat there for a long time, running through every detail again and again. If Maria was lying, why? Was she covering for Patricia? Or was I overthinking things, letting my paranoia twist something innocent into something sinister? I decided to let it go, at least for the moment. There was no point in pushing further without new evidence. But as the day wore on, my mind refused to let it rest. The more I thought about Maria's tone, the more certain I became, she wasn't just uncomfortable, she was lying. The question was, why? Patricia came home that evening as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a warm smile, kissed me on the cheek, and started preparing dinner like any other night. I watched her closely, looking for cracks in her facade, but she seemed perfectly at ease. You okay? She asked, glancing at me as she chopped vegetables. You've been quiet. I'm fine, I said quickly. Too quickly. Her hands paused for a moment, but she didn't press further. Later that night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I found myself staring at her. She looked so normal, so familiar, like the woman I'd loved for over a decade. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't really know her at all. When she finally went to bed, I stayed behind, staring at the blank screen long after the show ended. I didn't have proof, not yet. But I knew one thing for certain, Patricia and Maria were hiding something. And I was going to find out what. Patricia seemed to settle back into her usual routine after that night. She went to work, came home, and behaved like the woman I'd known for years. She gave me no fresh reasons to suspect her, no more unexplained smells, no forgotten items, no odd behavior. If anything, she was more attentive than usual, almost as if trying to erase the doubts I'd voiced during my drunken outburst. But I wasn't convinced. That sense of unease lingered, gnawing at me. I couldn't let it go, not after everything I'd noticed. So, I decided to push things further. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, I decided to test her reaction with a little improvisation. You know, I began casually, setting my fork down. I spoke to Maria the other day. Patricia looked up from her plate, her expression neutral but her grip tightening slightly on her glass of wine. Oh? What about? Just called to check in, I said with a shrug. I asked how she was doing, and the conversation drifted to the other night. You know, when she was supposedly over here for wine. Her face twitched ever so slightly, but she kept her composure. And what did she say? She told me she wasn't here, I said, leaning back in my chair. In fact, she said she hadn't seen you in weeks. The color drained from Patricia's face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Finally, she managed a nervous laugh. Michael, you must have misunderstood her. I don't think so, I said calmly. She was pretty clear. Her hands trembled as she set her glass down. It wasn't that Maria, she blurted out. You probably called the wrong one. Really? I raised an eyebrow. How many Marias do you know? She hesitated, scrambling for an answer. There's another Maria from work, she said finally, her voice unsteady. She's the one I was talking about. I should have clarified. The lie was so transparent it almost made me laugh, but I kept my face neutral. Right, I said slowly. The Maria from work. How convenient. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. I can give you her number if you don't believe me, she said defensively. That won't be necessary, I replied, standing up. I just thought it was odd, that's all. The conversation ended there, but the damage was done. Patricia was clearly rattled, and I knew she'd be on edge for days, wondering if I was still suspicious. She was right to worry. That night, as Patricia slept beside me, I made the decision to hire a private investigator. It was a step I hadn't wanted to take, partly because of the cost, but mostly because of what it represented. It felt like admitting defeat, like conceding that I couldn't trust the woman I'd built my life with. But I needed answers. The next day, I made some discreet inquiries and found a reputable investigator named Daniel. He had a solid track record, and after a brief phone call, we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe to discuss the details. As I explained my situation, he listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally as I laid out the facts. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. All right, he said finally. Here's how we'll handle this. I'll start by tailing her during work hours. If she's meeting someone or doing anything suspicious, I'll find out. I'll also check her social media, phone records, and anything else I can legally access. If there's something to uncover, I'll uncover it. How long will it take? I asked. That depends, he said. If she's actively seeing someone, we might catch her in a week. If she's being careful, it could take longer. Either way, I'll keep you updated. We agreed on a fee, and I left the cafe feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. The die was cast. Over the next few days, life went on as usual, or so it seemed. Patricia left for work every morning, came home every evening, and continued her routine as if nothing had changed. But I knew better. Daniel sent me regular updates, most of which were uneventful at first. He followed Patricia to her office, watched her leave for lunch, and tailed her as she ran errands. Nothing unusual. But then, on the fourth day, he called me. Michael, he said, his tone serious, we might have something. What is it? I asked, my heart pounding. She left work early today, he said. She drove to a park on the other side of town and met a man there. A man? My stomach turned. Who was he? I'm not sure yet, Daniel admitted. I've got photos of him, but I'll need some time to identify him. They sat in his car for about 30 minutes, talking. No physical contact that I could see, but they were definitely familiar with each other. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Did you follow him? Not yet, he said. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose her. But I'll find out who he is, don't worry. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking as I stared at the phone. This was it. Proof, or at least the beginning of it. Patricia came home that evening with the same warm smile, the same casual demeanor. She asked about my day, laughed at a joke I made, and curled up on the couch to watch TV. I watched her, wondering how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could act like everything was fine when it was anything but. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I was living with a stranger. The following morning, I received another call from Daniel. This time, his voice carried a note of certainty that sent a jolt of tension through me. I've identified the man she met at the park, he said. His name's Ryan. Mid-40s, divorced, works as a project manager. Lives about 15 minutes from your place. The name didn't ring a bell, but the connection was clear enough. Do they work together? I asked. No, Daniel replied. From what I've found so far, there's no professional link between them. But I'm digging deeper to be sure. Anything else? I asked, gripping the edge of the counter as I spoke. There's more, Daniel said. She met him again last night after she left your house. Around 9 p.m., she drove to his apartment. I followed her inside. My grip tightened. How long was she there? An hour, he said. No sign of any other visitors, and she left alone. I couldn't follow her inside the building, but I took pictures of her entering and leaving. My stomach churned. The image of Patricia walking into another man's home, knowing she'd return to our bed an hour later, made my blood boil. Send me everything, I said, my voice tight. Will do, Daniel replied. You'll have it by the afternoon. But Michael, I think it's time to start thinking about what you want to do next. When the photos arrived, they confirmed everything I didn't want to believe. There she was, in the same dress she'd worn to dinner, stepping into Ryan Foster's apartment building. She looked composed, not like someone sneaking around but like someone completely at ease. By the time she left, her hair was slightly disheveled, and she was checking her phone, oblivious to the camera capturing her betrayal. I spent hours staring at those images, replaying every moment of our life together in my mind. The dinners, the vacations, the promises. And all the while, she was lying to me. The idea of confronting her filled me with dread. If I did, she'd have no choice but to admit it or worse, try to spin another web of lies. That evening, Patricia came home as usual. She kissed me on the cheek, her touch as casual as ever, and asked about my day. Same old, I said, forcing a smile. We had dinner in near silence, the clinking of cutlery filling the void between us. Every time she looked at me, I wondered how she could hide the truth so well. After dinner, I decided it was time. I couldn't let this go on any longer. Patricia, I said as we sat on the couch, my tone measured. She looked up from her phone, her face calm. I need to ask you something, I said, my eyes locked on hers. Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. What is it? I know about Ryan Foster, I said plainly. Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, and she froze for a split second before quickly recovering. Who? Don't play dumb, I said, my voice firm. I know you've been seeing him. I know you've been to his apartment. Don't bother lying. Patricia's face went pale, and she set her phone down, her hands trembling slightly. Michael, it's not what you think, she said, her voice shaky. Oh, really? I asked, leaning forward. Then why don't you explain it to me? She hesitated, her mind clearly racing for an answer. Ryan's an old friend, she said finally. We've known each other for years. I've just been helping him through some things. Helping him, I repeated, my tone dripping with sarcasm. By meeting him in parks and going to his apartment late at night? You must think I'm an idiot. No, she said quickly, her voice rising. It's not like that. I swear. Then what is it like, Patricia? I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're cheating on me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I've been patient, I continued. I've given you every opportunity to come clean, and you've done nothing but lie. So don't insult me by pretending this is innocent. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head. Michael, please. You have to believe me. Ryan and I, it's nothing serious. It's just. Nothing serious? I cut her off, my voice cold. Do you even hear yourself? You're admitting it, Patricia. You're admitting you've been unfaithful. She broke down then, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to happen. I've been so unhappy, Michael. I didn't know how to tell you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Unhappy? I repeated. And instead of talking to me, you decided to screw someone else? I didn't screw him, she cried. It wasn't like that. We just talked. I needed someone to talk to. I stared at her, my mind racing. The evidence was damning, but her insistence on minimizing it only made me angrier. Do you think that makes it better? I asked, my voice low. Do you think I'll forgive you because you claim it wasn't physical? Michael, please, she begged, reaching for my hand. I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. I love you. I pulled my hand away, my jaw clenched. You don't get to say that, I said coldly. Not after this. Her sobs filled the room, but I felt nothing but anger and betrayal. Pack a bag, I said finally, my voice flat. You're leaving tonight. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with shock. What? No, Michael, please. We can work through this. There's nothing to work through, I said. You've destroyed this marriage, Patricia. Now get out. Saturday morning started quietly. Patricia had left the house early, claiming she needed to work overtime because it was the end of the quarter and there was too much to do. Her excuse was plausible enough, and I pretended to buy it without hesitation. Good luck, I had said, even managing a faint smile. But inside, I was already on high alert. Daniel, my private investigator, was tailing her as usual. I went about my morning routine: a coffee, a short jog, and a quick shower, keeping my phone close in case he called. By late morning, when no updates had come through, I started to feel restless. Then, just past noon, my phone buzzed. Michael, Daniel's voice was calm but firm. She's at the park. Same guy as before. This time, it's more than just talking. They're walking together, holding hands, and I just saw her kiss him. His words hit me like a hammer. My grip on the phone tightened as rage boiled inside me. Which park? I demanded, my voice shaking. Daniel gave me the location and clear directions to find them. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my keys and stormed out the door. The drive to the park was a blur. My knuckles were white as I gripped the steering wheel, the anger building with each passing second. I barely noticed the scenery or the pedestrians. All I could think about was Patricia, my wife, kissing another man. Daniel stayed on the phone with me, guiding me toward their location. They're near the east side, by the small lake, he said. She doesn't suspect a thing. Good, I growled, slamming the car into park as soon as I found a spot. I didn't care about making a scene. I didn't care who was watching. I just wanted answers, and I wanted them now. I spotted them almost immediately. She was leaning into him, laughing at something he'd said. His arm was casually draped over the back of the bench, and there was an intimacy between them that made my stomach churn. I took a deep breath and marched toward them. My footsteps were heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. Patricia! I shouted, my voice cutting through the serene park atmosphere like a whip. Both of them turned to look at me. Patricia's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Ryan, on the other hand, looked confused, his brow furrowing as he glanced between me and her. Who the hell is this? He asked, standing up. I ignored him, my focus laser-sharp on Patricia. You lying, cheating, I couldn't even finish the sentence. My voice cracked with the sheer force of my anger. So this is what you've been doing while I'm at work? While you're supposed to be working overtime? Patricia started crying immediately. Tears streamed down her face as she stammered, Michael, please, let me explain. Explain what? I snapped, my voice rising. That you've been sneaking around behind my back? That you're nothing but a liar? Ryan raised his hands, trying to defuse the situation. Hold on a second, he said, his tone cautious. What's going on here? Patricia, who is this guy? Through her sobs, Patricia managed to choke out the words that shattered whatever illusion Ryan had been living under. He's my husband. Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. He stepped back, as though the revelation physically struck him. Your husband? You're married? Patricia nodded, her face buried in her hands. You didn't tell me you were married. Ryan shouted, his voice rising in frustration. What the hell, Patricia? I didn't mean for this to happen, she wailed. I was going to tell you, I swear. Ryan turned to me, his face a mixture of guilt and anger. Look, man, I didn't know, he said quickly. I had no idea she was married. I thought she was single. I swear. The smell of cologne asterisk his cologne asterisk wafted toward me, making my fists clench. Ryan opened his mouth as if to say something else, but then seemed to think better of it. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm out of here," he said, stepping away. "This is between you two. I don't want any part of this." "Yeah, you'd better run," I growled, watching as he hurried off, his head down. The park was quiet again, save for Patricia's muffled sobs. A few passers-by had stopped to watch the commotion, their eyes lingering on us before moving on. I turned back to Patricia, my voice cold and steady. "How long?" She looked up at me, her face red and blotchy. "Michael, please." "How long?" Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "A few months," she admitted. "It started a few months ago." "And you didn't think to tell him or me that you're married?" I asked, my voice dripping with venom. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she cried. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. I didn't know how to stop." Her words felt hollow, like excuses made to shift blame away from herself. "Save your tears," I said, my voice hard. "You've made your choice, Patricia. You threw away everything we built together for this?" She didn't answer, just sat there, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I stared at her for a moment longer, the woman I thought I knew reduced to a stranger in my eyes. Then, without another word, I turned and walked away. I had the truth now. And it was uglier than I ever could have imagined. Packing my belongings didn't take long. We weren't officially married, so there wasn't any paperwork or legal battles to worry about. No divorce proceedings, no splitting of assets. Just a clean break. I had no intention of dragging this out. By the end of the day, I was gone. Patricia tried calling repeatedly, but I never answered. Each missed call was like a knock on a door I had already locked. I didn't care what she had to say, she had wasted her chance to explain when she chose lies over the truth. I stayed at a friend's place temporarily, someone who didn't ask too many questions but could tell I needed space. The silence was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. Then, about a week later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Patricia, it was Maria's husband. I debated for a moment whether to pick up. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Michael," Maria's voice came through, soft and hesitant. "It's me. What do you want?" I asked, my tone cold. I don't understand," she said. "Why did you leave?" "Patricia's devastated. She's been trying to reach you, and she's..." I cut her off, my anger flaring up instantly. "Why did I leave? Are you seriously asking me that?" There was a pause. "Michael, You covered for her," I snapped, my voice rising. "You knew about the affair. You helped her lie to me, and now you have the nerve to ask why I left?" "I didn't know it would get this bad," she said quickly, her words tumbling out. I thought she'd stop. She told me it wasn't serious." "Not serious?" I laughed bitterly. "She cheated on me, Maria. She lied to my face for months, and you stood there and helped her. You're just as guilty as she is." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to." I didn't let her finish. "Don't call me again," I said sharply before hanging up. That was the last time I spoke to anyone connected to Patricia. I blocked Maria's number, along with Patricia's, and deleted them both from my contacts. As far as I was concerned, that chapter of my life was closed. Still, there was one thing I couldn't fully shake: the footprints outside the bedroom window. Were they really hers? Could she have been telling the truth about cleaning the glass? The thought nagged at me, but in the end, it didn't matter. True or not, those footprints had been the spark that set everything in motion. Patricia had made her choices, and now she was alone with them. Alone to face the guilt, the lies, and the consequences of her actions. I had nothing more to say to her, no closure to offer. The silence was her punishment.